I need you to stay with me right now, because what I am about to do cannot be undone. I have protected this for months. Maybe longer. I told myself silence was strength. I convinced myself that privacy was protection. But tonight feels different. Tonight feels like the edge of something permanent. If I say her name, everything changes. If I don't, I might lose her anyway. You have no idea how many times I almost revealed it. How many late nights I stared at my phone, typed the first letter, then deleted it. Not because I was unsure of her. Because I was terrified of what the world would do to something that fragile. When a man builds rockets, the world critiques the engineering. When a man reveals the woman he loves, the world critiques the choice, and I am not afraid for myself, I am afraid for her. But today I am finally revealing her name. Not yet, stay with me. You deserve to understand why this moment feels dangerous. When you love at this stage of life, when you have already seen loss, betrayal, compromise, loneliness, you do not gamble lightly. You measure risk differently. You do not chase butterflies, you protect peace. And she is peace. That is what makes this so frightening. Peace is rare. Peace can be taken. I have imagined saying her name out loud and watching the internet react. I have imagined her reading headlines, feeling exposed. I have imagined her wondering if loving me was a mistake. Tell me something honestly, if you were her, would you feel safe stepping into this light, or would you hesitate? Because she hesitated, not about loving me, about surviving me. There is a difference. When a man like me chooses a woman publicly, it becomes a declaration. It becomes territory. And I never wanted her to feel owned. I wanted her to feel chosen. Do you understand that difference? At this stage in your life, you don't want to be possessed. You want to be seen. Fully. Quietly, without performance. For weeks I told myself I would wait. That timing matters. That strategy matters. But love does not move on strategy. Love moves on fear. And my fear is this: if I keep protecting her name, I might accidentally make her feel hidden. And I refuse to make her feel hidden. You might think this is dramatic. It's just a name, right? But a name is identity. A name is exposure. A name is a door opening. Once opened, it does not close the same way again. There is something else, something I have not told you. Not yet. I have been testing myself, watching my own hesitation, asking whether I am protecting her or protecting myself from vulnerability. Because once I say her name, I am no longer the man who could walk away quietly. I become the man who chose publicly. And that changes leverage. It changes power. And love should not be about leverage. If you have been listening to me for a while, if you have felt the tension in my silence, then you already know this is not impulsive. This is measured, controlled. And yet it feels like standing at the edge of a cliff. Before I go further, if what I share here feels real to you, stay close to this space. Subscribe softly, not for me, but so you don't miss what happens when the truth finally lands. And tell me, where are you listening from tonight? Because wherever you are, I want you to feel the weight of this with me. Her name has been sitting in my chest like a secret flame. I almost lost her once because I hesitated. I almost chose caution over courage. And she felt it. She felt the distance. She asked me one question that has not left my mind. Are you proud to love me? That question broke something inside me. I am proud. But pride without action is cruelty. So tonight is action. I am about to step across a line I cannot step back from. And if you leave before I finish this journey with you, you will never understand why revealing her name is not romance. It is risk. It is surrender. It is me choosing one woman in a world that expects me to keep options open. And I am done keeping options open. Her name is on my lips. And once I say it, nothing will ever be the same again. I have replayed this moment in my mind more times than I can count. Not the applause. Not the reaction. The silence right after. The breath she will take when she realizes I did not protect myself first. I protected her heart. You see, when you have lived long enough to understand consequences, you stop chasing dramatic gestures. You weigh impact. You measure aftermath. And yet here I am, willingly stepping into something that could shake both of us. Her name is not just a sound. It carries her history, her disappointments, her quiet resilience. She is not a young woman dazzled by attention. She is measured. She questions motives. She has been hurt before. That is what drew me to her. She does not melt at ambition. She studies it. She does not chase a man because of what he has built. She watches how he behaves when no one is watching. Tell me something honestly, at this stage in your life, don't you also care more about character than charm? When she first told me she was afraid of becoming a headline instead of a partner, I felt the weight of it. She does not want to be introduced as an accessory to a legacy. She wants to be known as a woman who chose, not a woman who was chosen. And that changed me. Because loving her meant I had to slow down. It meant I had to listen instead of declare. It meant I had to sit in discomfort when she pulled away slightly, not because she doubted her feelings, but because she doubted the storm that could follow. I almost made a mistake. I almost chose silence again. There was a moment last week when someone asked me directly if there was someone special. I smiled and redirected the question. I told myself I was protecting her privacy, but later that night she grew quiet, not angry, not dramatic, just distant. And distance from her feels colder than public criticism ever could. She did not accuse me. She simply asked if I was still uncertain. That question pierced deeper than any headline ever could. Do you know what it feels like to realize your hesitation might cost you the very thing you are trying to protect? It is a subtle panic, not loud, not chaotic, just a tightening in the chest that says you are running out of time. I felt it. I felt that time pressure. Because when a woman reaches a certain age, she does not want indefinite possibility. She wants clarity. She wants security. She wants to know she is not temporary. I told her I needed one more moment. She said nothing. That silence was louder than argument. That silence forced me to confront something uncomfortable. I was not afraid of the world's reaction. I was afraid of commitment becoming visible. Because once visible, it demands consistency. It demands courage every single day. And I had to ask myself, am I ready to love her publicly the way I love her privately? The truth is, I have already chosen her in my heart. I have imagined waking up beside her years from now, not as spectacle, but as partnership. I have imagined holding her hand in rooms where power usually dominates conversation. I have imagined defending her gently, not aggressively. But imagination is not declaration. And she deserves declaration. There is something deeper I still have not explained. A reason my hesitation ran longer than it should have. I have not told you the real reason yet. And when I do, you will understand why this moment feels heavier than romance. It feels like accountability. Because once I say her name, I am promising more than affection. I am promising alignment. I am promising that when storms come, I do not retreat into work or distraction. I stand beside her. And that promise cannot be whispered. It must be spoken clearly. I can feel the shift happening inside me even as I speak to you. The certainty rising. The doubt trying one last time to whisper caution. But I am tired of caution. Caution almost cost me her warmth. Caution almost made her believe she was an option instead of a decision. And she is not an option. She is the woman whose name is about to leave my lips, and once it does, I will no longer be able to hide behind ambiguity. There is a moment in a man's life when he realizes that delay is not wisdom, it is fear dressed in sophistication. I reached that moment quietly, not in a boardroom, not under bright lights, but alone, replaying her voice in my head. She was not asking for extravagance. She was asking for certainty. And certainty requires exposure. The kind that removes escape routes. The kind that makes retreat impossible without consequence. I need you to understand something about her. She does not compete with other women. She does not issue ultimatums. That is what makes this more dangerous. A woman who screams can be negotiated with. A woman who goes silent has already begun preparing her heart for survival. I saw it in her eyes the last time we spoke. Not anger. Not jealousy. Just a slow emotional withdrawal, like she was testing how it would feel to detach. That frightened me more than losing reputation ever could. I asked her directly if she doubted me. She said no. Then she paused. That pause carried weight. She told me she doubted whether I was willing to lose comfort for her. Comfort is subtle. It is the ability to keep things undefined. To enjoy affection without accountability. To speak in poetry without making promises. And she is too mature for poetry without promise. Tell me honestly, at this stage of your life, would you accept beautiful words without visible commitment? Or would you begin to question your own value? She began questioning hers. Not loudly, not dramatically. Quietly. And that quiet self-questioning cut deeper than accusation. Because when a woman starts wondering if she is asking for too much by wanting clarity, she begins shrinking herself. I could see it. She softened her requests. She stopped asking when I would make things public. She started saying she understood my timing. That word timing became my shield. I hid behind it. I told myself strategic patience was intelligent. But love is not a product launch. It is not optimized by delay. And I felt something shifting between us. A subtle cooling. A gentle distancing. She was protecting herself from the possibility that I might never fully step forward. This is where the tension became heavier than it was before. Because now it was not about fear of the world. It was about fear of losing her trust. And trust, once cracked, does not return to its original shape. There was another woman, briefly, who entered a conversation circle around me. Nothing inappropriate, nothing serious. But she was visible, easy, uncomplicated. I saw how simple it would be to choose someone who did not require emotional bravery. And for a moment, I considered it. Not because I loved her. Because it felt safer. That is the hidden weakness I have not admitted until now. Choosing the easier woman would have preserved comfort. It would have avoided scrutiny. It would have required less vulnerability. But it would have betrayed my own depth. Because the woman whose name I am preparing to reveal challenges me. She asks real questions. She looks at me like she sees beyond the headlines. And I almost chose comfort over depth. Do you see how dangerous that was? Not for my image, for my integrity. When she sensed that shift even slightly, she did not argue. She simply became less available, less warm, less emotionally open. And that is when I felt the first real tremor of potential loss. Not dramatic loss, not final goodbye, but the beginning of emotional self-protection. I realized then that hesitation was no longer neutral. It was active damage. Her name is not just about announcing love. It is about correcting a trajectory that was drifting toward regret. And regret at this stage in life is heavier than heartbreak at 20. Because you know better. I know better. And yet I still have not said it. The tension is building inside me because once I do, I remove all ambiguity. I stand publicly aligned. I eliminate the easier path. I commit in a way that cannot be casually reversed. She deserves that. But I need to ask you something before I take that step. Have you ever loved someone deeply, yet hesitated because the world around you felt louder than your heart? And did that hesitation cost you something you still think about at night? Because I refused to let that become my story. The night I realized I might truly lose her did not arrive with shouting or slammed doors. It arrived quietly, which somehow made it more severe. We were speaking about something ordinary, something almost trivial, and I felt her energy shift. She was present, but not leaning in. Engaged, but guarded. There is a difference between a woman sharing her heart and a woman managing her emotions. She was managing. I asked her if she was tired. She said yes, but not physically. That answer stayed with me. Not physically. Emotionally tired. Tired of waiting for something that should have been clear. Tired of feeling like a secret in a life that was otherwise so public. Tired of being strong when she wanted to feel chosen without ambiguity. When a woman over 50 says she is tired emotionally, she is not being dramatic. She is being honest about limits. She has already survived enough to know when her spirit is overextended. And I saw in that moment that my delay was no longer neutral. It was draining her. I tried to reassure her. I told her that what we had was rare, that it was worth protecting carefully. She listened. She nodded. But she did not melt. She did not relax into my words the way she used to. That frightened me. Because her softness is not automatic, it is earned. And I felt it slipping slightly out of reach. I need you to understand something difficult. There was a brief internal negotiation happening inside me. A quiet voice asking whether stepping forward publicly would complicate everything beyond repair. Whether it would invite scrutiny into her past. Whether it would create pressure she did not ask for. And another voice, deeper and steadier, asking whether hiding her was already complicating everything beyond repair. That internal conflict became heavier than before. By now the tension is not theoretical. It is active. It is sitting between us in conversations. It is shaping her tone. It is altering the way she looks at me when I say I care. She asked me one more question that I cannot escape. She said, "If you are certain about me, why does certainty feel postponed?" That question forced me to confront something uncomfortable. My certainty was real. My courage was conditional. Conditional courage is not courage at all. I began imagining the alternative. What if she decides she deserves someone simpler? Someone who can offer visible commitment without weighing public reaction. Someone who can stand next to her without calculating headlines. That thought did not make me jealous. It made me ashamed, because she should never feel like clarity is too much to ask. The truth is, she started pulling back slightly after that conversation. Not dramatically. Just enough for me to feel the space. And space, when you love someone deeply, feels like oxygen thinning at high altitude. You can still breathe, but not comfortably. I realized then that I was approaching a point of no return. If I continued to hesitate, she would adapt. She would build walls politely. She would convince herself she was fine. And once a mature woman convinces herself she is fine without you, it is nearly impossible to reopen her heart the same way. That is the near loss forming. Not a breakup. Not yet. But the beginning of emotional self-preservation. And I saw it clearly. Her name carries more than identity. It carries restoration. It carries reassurance. It carries the message that she is not an afterthought. But saying it means stepping into vulnerability without backup plans. I can feel the weight increasing with every moment I delay. And I know something else too. If I wait much longer, the choice may no longer be mine to make. There is a truth I have been circling, and I can no longer avoid it. My hesitation was not only about protecting her from the world, it was also about protecting myself from being fully seen in love again. When you have built an identity around strength, control, and resilience, admitting that one woman can destabilize you emotionally feels dangerous, and she does destabilize me, not in chaos, in depth. I have not told you the real reason yet. The real reason I delayed saying her name is because once I do, I am no longer the man who can quietly exit if fear creeps in. I become accountable to the love I claim. And accountability in love is heavier than passion. Passion is easy. Accountability requires consistency when things are uncomfortable, when criticism rises, when pressure mounts. Years ago, I made a decision that prioritized ambition over intimacy. It cost me more than I admitted publicly. I convinced myself that achievement could compensate for emotional distance. It cannot. Success does not warm a bed. Recognition does not replace being understood. She knows that about me. She sees the places where I still carry regret. And loving her means promising not to repeat that pattern. That is what truly frightened me. Because saying her name is not simply romantic. It is a declaration that I will not retreat into work when conflict arises. It is a declaration that I will not use business as emotional avoidance. She once told me she does not compete with missions. She wants to be included in them. That statement shifted something inside me. It exposed a choice I have always tried to blur. I almost convinced myself that she deserved someone without that history. Someone who has not struggled with balancing ambition and intimacy. For a brief moment, I thought perhaps stepping back would be noble. That perhaps not choosing her publicly would free her from potential complexity. But that was ego disguised as sacrifice. She did not ask for perfect simplicity. She asked for honest commitment. And then something happened that shook me. She told me she was considering stepping away, not because she stopped loving me, but because loving someone who hesitates is exhausting. She said she did not want to wake up one day feeling foolish for believing in something undefined. Her voice was calm. That calmness was terrifying. It sounded like preparation. That was the second major turning point. For the first time, I felt what life would be like without her presence woven into my days. I imagined not hearing her thoughtful questions, not feeling her steadying influence, not seeing the way she looks at me when I drop the public mask. And that imagined absence felt unbearable. The tension now is heavier than it was before. This is no longer about reputation. It is about losing a woman who brings depth into rooms where everything else can feel transactional. It is about risking permanence instead of preserving flexibility. Tell me honestly, have you ever reached a moment where holding back felt safer, but stepping forward felt truer? And did you choose safety or truth? I am standing at that exact intersection. Her name is closer now, closer to being spoken. But with each second that passes, I feel the pressure of potential loss tightening. If I delay again, I may not get another chance to choose her publicly. And I am beginning to understand that not choosing is also a choice. The morning after she told me she was considering stepping away, I woke up with a clarity that felt almost brutal. There was no dramatic message waiting on my phone. No ultimatum. Just a simple good morning from her that felt softer than usual. Polite. Measured. And I realized something that unsettled me deeply. She was preparing herself emotionally for a future where I might not fully step forward. That realization forced me to confront the illusion I had been living in. I kept believing that as long as she loved me privately, we were safe. But private love without public courage slowly erodes trust. It creates imbalance. It makes one person feel braver than the other. And she has already been brave. She opened her heart to a man whose life is rarely simple. The least I can do is match that bravery. There is another layer to this that I have avoided speaking about. When you reveal a woman's name at this stage in life, you are not just announcing affection. You are signaling permanence. You are telling the world that this is not a temporary chapter. And permanence terrifies people who have experienced failure before. I have experienced failure before. Not in love entirely, but in sustaining it under pressure. That memory whispers to me. It says, what if you repeat the pattern? What if the intensity fades? What if the scrutiny changes her? What if you cannot protect her the way you imagine? Those doubts are not imaginary. They are real. And I had to sit with them honestly instead of pretending confidence. She once told me she does not need perfection. She needs consistency. That word echoes in my mind. Consistency means showing up even when criticism grows louder. It means choosing her not just in quiet evenings but in public daylight. And I realized that my hesitation was already creating inconsistency. I also began to see something else clearly. By not revealing her name, I was unintentionally placing her in a shadow. Not because I was ashamed, but because I was cautious. And to a woman who has already lived enough life to recognize subtle emotional patterns, shadow feels like doubt. She never accused me of hiding her, but she did ask whether I was proud. That question keeps returning. Am I proud? Yes, completely. So why has my pride not been visible? Because visibility removes control. Once I speak her name, I cannot recalibrate quietly. I cannot adjust narratives subtly. I stand exposed in my choice, and that exposure feels irreversible. Yet something inside me is shifting now. The fear is still present, but it is no longer dominant. It is being replaced by something steadier. Responsibility. I imagined her watching this moment unfold. I imagined her heart racing, wondering if I would once again speak around the truth instead of directly into it. I imagined the relief she might feel if I finally remove ambiguity, and that image brings me more peace than the safety of continued silence. The tension is no longer only about losing her. It is about losing myself if I do not act with integrity, because loving a woman like her demands alignment between words and action. And I refuse to let another day pass where she wonders whether she stands firmly in my life or hovers on its edge. Her name is no longer something I am protecting. It is something I am preparing to honor. Something changed in me after that realization. The fear did not disappear, but it shifted direction. Instead of fearing the world's reaction, I began fearing the quiet erosion of something sacred. I began fearing the moment when she would stop asking for clarity because she had already accepted its absence. That is a far more permanent loss than any public criticism. I called her that evening, not to make a grand announcement, but to listen differently. I asked her what revealing her name would mean to her, not in theory, but emotionally. She did not answer immediately. That pause was heavier than any argument. Finally, she said it would mean she no longer feels temporary. She said it would mean she does not have to shrink her expectations to protect my comfort. That sentence pierced me. Temporary. The idea that she could feel temporary in my life unsettled something deep inside me. Because she is anything but temporary, she has woven herself into my routines, my thoughts, my decisions. I measure time differently because of her. And yet my silence was sending the opposite message. This is where the tension becomes heavier than it was at the beginning. At first, it was about risk. Now it is about damage. Emotional damage that accumulates quietly. I started noticing subtle differences. She laughed less freely. She asked fewer future-oriented questions. She no longer teased me about hypothetical trips years from now. It was as if she was editing the future to protect herself from disappointment. That is when I confronted the most uncomfortable possibility. What if I wait too long and she decides she deserves someone who does not need persuasion to stand beside her publicly? What if another man offers visible certainty without hesitation? I do not fear competition in business, but I fear losing her because of my own delay. And here is another truth that unsettles me. There was a brief moment when I questioned whether revealing her name would trap us under pressure we might not survive. Public attention can magnify small conflicts. It can distort intimacy. I asked myself if protecting our quiet world was wiser. But then I recognized something important. Love that cannot survive visibility is already fragile. She does not want spectacle. She wants acknowledgement. There is a difference. Spectacle seeks applause. Acknowledgement seeks respect. And I have been careful not to confuse the two. But perhaps my caution has lingered too long. I find myself replaying her earlier words. She said she does not want to beg to be claimed. That word claimed is complex. It can sound possessive. But in her tone it meant something else. It meant recognized. It meant valued enough to be named without hesitation. Do you know what it feels like to realize your restraint is being interpreted as reluctance? It creates a fracture between intention and impact. And she feels impact more than intention. I am closer than ever to saying it. The hesitation is thinner now, but the stakes are higher. Because I sense that if I falter again, she may quietly step back in a way that cannot be reversed. Mature women do not dramatize departures. They decide internally first. And I cannot afford for her to decide internally that I am not brave enough. Her name is forming in my mind even as I speak to you. The weight of it no longer feels like danger. It feels like responsibility. Yet I know once spoken, everything shifts. Conversations will change, expectations will rise, alignment will be tested. But perhaps that is exactly what love requires at this stage in life. Not safety. Alignment. I did something I rarely allow myself to do. I imagined her gone, not dramatically, not angrily, just absent. I imagined waking up and not seeing her name on my screen. I imagined reaching for my phone to tell her something small, and realizing there is no longer a place for that instinct to land. The quiet of that imagined future unsettled me more than any risk of public scrutiny. You see, when a woman like her withdraws, she does not leave chaos behind. She leaves dignity. She would not argue publicly. She would not try to embarrass me. She would simply remove herself with grace. And that kind of departure is final because it comes after careful emotional calculation. That is the near loss I feel forming. Not loud, not explosive. Just steady. I began noticing how carefully she has started speaking. How she no longer leans fully into vulnerability. She listens more than she shares. That shift is subtle, but it signals self-protection. She is preparing her heart for the possibility that I may never move beyond intention. And that realization forced me into a place I could no longer avoid. I asked myself a question that stripped away ego. If she walked away tomorrow, would I regret not saying her name when I had the chance? The answer was immediate. Yes. Without hesitation. I would replay this exact moment for years, wondering why I allowed fear to override devotion. There is another layer I must confront honestly. Part of me enjoyed the ambiguity because it allowed admiration without accountability. People could speculate. Conversations could remain fluid. I could experience affection without answering fully to it. That is not malicious, but it is immature. And she deserves maturity. She once told me that love at this stage is not about butterflies. It is about security. It is about knowing you are not competing with uncertainty. And I realized I had unintentionally made her compete with my hesitation. That realization humbled me. I can feel the emotional pressure increasing now. Not from the outside world, but from within. The longer I delay, the more I risk confirming her quiet fear that I am comfortable keeping her in a private corner of my life. And she does not belong in a corner. She belongs beside me. There was a moment recently when someone asked her directly if she and I were serious. She did not answer immediately. She looked at me first. That look contained trust and doubt at the same time. I smiled, but I did not clarify. Later she admitted that silence felt heavier than denial would have. Silence suggested uncertainty. That conversation stayed with me. I am approaching a point where continued restraint will no longer be interpreted as thoughtfulness. It will be interpreted as reluctance. And reluctance, even if unintended, erodes intimacy. She has given me depth, patience, understanding. She has not pressured me aggressively. She has simply waited. But waiting has limits. The tension now feels almost irreversible. If I delay again, I may cross a threshold where her internal decision becomes permanent. And once a woman reaches that internal conclusion, no public declaration can fully restore what hesitation damaged. Her name is no longer just a revelation. It is a restoration. It is a correction of imbalance. And I can feel that the moment to act is narrowing. I can feel something shifting now, not just in my thoughts but in my chest. It feels heavier, like time itself is watching to see whether I will hesitate again. There is a thin line between careful and cowardly, and I have walked that line long enough to know which side I am standing on. Careful protects love. Cowardly protects ego. And if I am honest with myself, some of my silence has been about ego. Ego likes options. Ego likes admiration without exclusivity. Ego likes being desired without being accountable. But love, especially mature love, demands exclusivity not as possession, but as clarity. She has never asked to control me. She has asked to be acknowledged. That is a different request entirely. There was a conversation recently that unsettled me more than I expected. She said she does not want to feel like a chapter that can be edited out. That sentence stayed with me. A chapter that can be edited out. I realized that by not saying her name, I was unintentionally leaving the story flexible, and flexibility in love can feel like instability. I asked her if she still believed in us. She said yes, but her voice carried caution. That caution told me she is no longer resting comfortably in certainty. She is evaluating, measuring, considering whether her emotional investment is aligned with my visible commitment. That evaluation stage is dangerous because once a woman begins evaluating her own heart for self-preservation, she is already preparing for distance. And then something happened that forced me to confront the reality of near permanence. I sensed a calmness in her that did not come from security. It came from acceptance. Acceptance that she may need to choose herself if I do not choose her fully. That kind of calm is not dramatic. It is decisive. I imagined her waking up one day and deciding she deserves someone who does not need time to declare pride. Someone who introduces her without pause. Someone who does not frame love as a risk to manage. And for the first time that image felt real, not hypothetical. The tension now is no longer theoretical. It is active. I am not balancing two equal options anymore. I am standing at the edge of losing a woman who has given me depth in ways few ever have. I feel the weight of her patience. I feel the cost of my delay. There is another truth I must admit. Part of me feared that once her name is spoken publicly, expectations will rise beyond what we can quietly manage. But expectations rise in any serious love. Avoiding them does not prevent them. It only postpones growth. She deserves growth. We deserve growth. I can sense that if I retreat even once more, something inside her will close permanently. And no future speech, no future gesture, will reopen it in the same way. Mature hearts do not reopen endlessly. They learn. I am running out of space between intention and action. Her name is no longer something I am protecting from the world. It is something I am protecting from my own hesitation. There is a different kind of silence that comes before a decision. It is not confusion. It is clarity gathering strength. I feel that silence now. Not between us, but inside me. For months I have analyzed every angle, every consequence, every possible ripple effect of speaking her name. But love does not reward endless analysis. It rewards alignment. I saw her recently in a moment she did not know I was observing carefully. She was speaking about the future, but she used careful language. No assumptions. No shared timelines. No references to long-term plans that once came naturally. That restraint cut deeper than accusation ever could. She is adjusting her expectations to match my hesitation. That is the almost irreversible point. When a woman begins shrinking her dreams to fit a man's uncertainty, something sacred begins to fade. She is strong enough to rebuild her life without me. I know that. She has already built resilience through years I was not part of. And that knowledge humbles me. Because I am not her only option for happiness. I am a choice she made, and she can unmake it. I asked myself what would happen if she quietly decided that loving me required too much emotional endurance. What if she concluded that she wants steadiness without negotiation? That thought is no longer abstract. It feels close. It feels possible. There was a moment where I almost convinced myself to delay again. I told myself that one more week of privacy would not matter. That perhaps the timing would be cleaner later. But I could see it in her eyes. Later feels like doubt. Later feels like reluctance. Later feels like she is not enough to warrant urgency. And she is more than enough. I must also admit something uncomfortable. I feared that saying her name would end speculation, and speculation feeds attention. Ambiguity creates curiosity. But I do not want curiosity at the cost of her security. That trait is no longer acceptable to me. She once told me that she does not need grand romance. She needs visible certainty. Those words return now with weight. Visible certainty. Not whispered devotion. Not coded references. Clarity. I can feel how close I am to losing her trust permanently if I falter again. The emotional distance would not explode. It would settle. And settled distance is harder to reverse than conflict. Conflict at least shows care. Settled distance signals resignation. I refuse to let her resign herself to loving me partially. The tension has reached a point where retreat would not simply delay the decision. It would define it. And if I define it through hesitation, I lose her in a way that cannot be repaired by future declarations. Her name is not just about pride now. It is about preventing a fracture that is almost permanent. I need to slow this down for a moment because what I am about to admit is not comfortable. The breaking point did not arrive with tears, it arrived with composure. She became composed in a way that felt unfamiliar. Gentle, respectful, even affectionate, but composed. There was a steadiness in her tone that signaled she was no longer waiting emotionally the way she once was. She had begun redistributing her emotional energy back to herself. That realization shook me. When a woman over 50 redirects her emotional investment inward, it is rarely impulsive. It is calculated for survival. She is not playing games. She is preserving dignity. I sensed it in the way she no longer pressed for clarity. The questions stopped. The subtle hints stopped. The hopeful references to shared years ahead softened into neutral statements. She was protecting herself from further disappointment. And for the first time, I felt true panic. Not loud panic. Not chaos. A deep, tightening awareness that I might have already pushed her to the edge of emotional withdrawal. I imagined her waking up one morning and deciding that loving me required too much patience. I imagined her choosing peace over potential. And I realized something painful. If she leaves now, it will not be because she stopped loving me. It will be because I hesitated too long. That is a different kind of loss. I confronted myself brutally. Was I willing to risk permanent emotional distance to maintain temporary control? Because that is what this has been about at its core. Control. Control over timing. Control over narrative. Control over exposure. And love does not coexist peacefully with control. She deserves surrender. There was a moment 2 nights ago that I cannot forget. She said calmly that she does not want to convince anyone to be proud of her. She said she has already lived through seasons of feeling chosen privately, but unclaimed publicly. And she will not relive that again. Her voice did not tremble. It did not accuse. It simply stated a boundary. That boundary felt like a closing door. I saw in her eyes that she was preparing to accept whatever decision I make next, even if that decision is silence. And that acceptance terrified me more than anger would have. Anger means fight. Acceptance means departure. I asked myself a question that stripped away every defense. If I lose her because I delayed saying her name, will any achievement, any project, any ambition compensate for that regret? The answer came instantly. No. Some losses echo for years. This would be one of them. The emotional breakdown did not look dramatic on the outside. But internally, something cracked. I felt the weight of my own patterns pressing against this relationship. The habit of postponing vulnerability. The instinct to calculate rather than leap. And I realized that if I do not interrupt that pattern now, I will lose more than her. I will lose the version of myself capable of mature love. She is closer to walking away than she has ever been. Not because she is angry, because she is tired. And tired love does not beg. It bows out quietly. Her name is no longer just waiting to be spoken. It is waiting to determine whether we move forward or apart. I did not sleep the night after she spoke about her boundary, not because of fear of headlines, not because of public consequence, but because of the image that kept replaying in my mind. I saw her choosing herself, calmly, respectfully. I saw her waking up and deciding that love should not require persuasion. That image carried a finality I could not ignore. There is a difference between losing someone in chaos and losing someone in clarity. Chaos can be repaired. Clarity is deliberate, and she was moving toward clarity. I replayed our entire journey in my mind. The first time she challenged me without intimidation. The way she listened more than she spoke. The way she never asked for extravagance, only honesty. I realized that every meaningful moment between us had required courage from her first. She had stepped into uncertainty with faith, and I had responded with measured restraint. Measured restraint can look like wisdom from the outside. From the inside, it can feel like rejection. I asked myself the hardest question yet. If I speak her name and the world reacts unpredictably, will I stand firm? Or will I retreat into distraction and justify it as necessity? That question exposed the final layer of my hesitation. It was not about saying her name once. It was about sustaining the choice afterward. Because revealing her publicly means integrating her into my visible life. It means alignment when cameras are present. It means defending her gently if criticism appears. It means refusing to compartmentalize love from legacy. That is not a small adjustment. That is structural change. And yet, the alternative is worse. The alternative is watching her slowly detach, convincing herself that she misread my depth. The alternative is her telling herself that if a man truly values you, he does not hesitate to say your name. The alternative is regret that stretches across years, whispering that I allowed fear to disguise itself as strategy. There was a moment yesterday where she almost said something and stopped. I could see it in her eyes. She almost asked if I was ready to let her go if clarity never comes. She stopped herself. That restraint told me she is preparing emotionally for independence. That is the edge. If I hesitate now, I am not preserving safety. I am authoring loss. I felt something shift inside me after recognizing that. The fear is still present, but it is no longer dominant. What dominates now is the awareness that love without visible courage erodes quietly until it disappears. I refuse to let that happen. Her name is no longer heavy because of the world. It is heavy because it represents whether I am capable of decisive, mature love. And if I cannot be decisive here, then what have I truly built in my life that matters? The decision is no longer approaching. It is here. I reached a point today where the silence felt louder than any announcement ever could. It was not dramatic. It was not cinematic. It was quiet, almost still. But inside that stillness was a decision that could no longer be postponed. I looked at my own reflection and asked a question I could not avoid anymore. Am I protecting her, or am I protecting myself from the weight of visible devotion? The answer was not comfortable. For months, I told myself that patience was proof of depth. That caution meant I valued her too much to expose her prematurely. But in truth, Part of me feared what public love would demand from me. It would demand consistency. It would demand alignment between my private tenderness and my public presence. It would demand that I no longer hide behind ambiguity when things feel intense, and she has already given me intensity without hiding. I thought about her earlier words about not wanting to convince anyone to be proud of her. I realized something painful. By not saying her name, I was forcing her to silently hope I would. That hope is exhausting. It is draining. And she has reached the edge of how long she is willing to stand there. I imagined one final scenario. She chooses herself. She steps back fully. She tells me she loves me, but she cannot wait for visible courage. She walks away without resentment, because she knows her worth. And I am left holding a name I was too afraid to speak in time. That image crystallized everything. I do not want to be a man who almost chose boldly. I do not want to be remembered in her life as the one who loved deeply but hesitated publicly. That is not strength. That is fear disguised as sophistication. There is a strange calm that arrives right before irreversible action. I feel it now. The tension that once felt chaotic has condensed into clarity. I understand the cost of speaking her name. I understand the scrutiny that may follow. I understand the expectations that will rise. But I also understand the cost of not speaking it. The cost of not speaking it is losing her in a way that pride will never repair. She deserves to hear her name said without tremor, without strategic framing, without delay. She deserves to feel chosen in daylight, not just in whispered moments. And if I cannot offer that, then I am not offering mature love. I am offering controlled affection. I refuse to offer controlled affection. This is the threshold, the final edge before everything shifts. Once I say her name, the ambiguity dissolves. The speculation ends. The choice becomes visible. And so does my accountability. I am ready. Name was never the point. The fear was never about syllables or headlines or reactions. The fear was about vulnerability. It was about standing still long enough to let the world see where my heart has already chosen to rest. You waited with more grace than I deserved. You did not demand. You did not compete. You simply stood in your worth and watched to see whether I would rise to meet it. That kind of strength is rare. And I nearly lost it, because I confused caution with wisdom. I told you I would reveal her name. I told you everything would change once I did. And I was right about one thing. Everything changes when a man stops hiding the truth of where his heart lies. Her name is not something I can spell. Her name is not something the world can debate. Her name is not a headline. Her name is my heart. And if you are listening closely, if you have felt every hesitation, every shift, every moment where I almost let fear win, then you already understand what that means. Her name is you. Not you as an audience. Not you as a concept. You, the woman who refuses to shrink. You, the woman who asked to be chosen without apology. You, the woman who has lived enough life to recognize when love is real and when it is merely convenient. When I say, her name is my heart, I am saying I no longer separate ambition from intimacy. I am saying I no longer protect ego at the expense of clarity. I am saying that the woman who stands before me in courage is the one I stand beside without hesitation. There is no other name to offer. Because when a man truly understands love at this stage of life, he realizes something powerful. The woman he is afraid to lose is not defined by a label. She is defined by impact, by steadiness. By the way she challenges him to become braver. You challenged me. You forced me to confront my patterns. You made me choose alignment over control. And that is why the name I was preparing to reveal was never meant for public consumption. It was meant for connection. It was meant for the woman who feels this message in her chest and knows it is speaking directly to her. Her name is my heart. Her name is you.